Moving into a new neighborhood should feel like a fresh start, a chance to build memories, plant roots, and be at peace. That was the plan when I moved into my quiet suburban home in Georgia after completing my contract work overseas. I had just gotten married to a wonderful woman, Captain Amelia Torres, a decorated military officer with multiple deployments under her belt and a heart made of gold. Our plan was simple: settle down, enjoy a calm life, and give back to the community. We chose this neighborhood because it was quiet and advertised itself as veteran-friendly. But as I quickly learned, not everyone in the Homeowners Association or the HOA shared that sentiment. Enter Karen. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the HOA president and self-declared protector of the community's standards. Blonde bob haircut, clipboard always in hand, and a voice that could peel paint. Karen thrived on control, and to her, we were an unusual element. When I moved in alone, she was polite too polite. Fake smiles, short conversations. She asked a few invasive questions about my work and my past. I chalked it up to nosiness. But things changed dramatically once Amelia moved in 2 weeks later. Amelia, in uniform, carried herself with calm pride. She wasn't loud or disruptive. But on the first day she arrived, Karen stood across the street with arms crossed, glaring like we were breaking some unspoken law. It didn't take long for the trouble to start. 3 days after Amelia moved in, we received a letter citing a violation for having a car with a military decal in the driveway, something I later confirmed wasn't a real rule. Then came warnings about too many overnight guests, clearly targeting my wife. Amelia, ever respectful, suggested we attend the next HOA meeting to clear things up. But Karen wasn't interested in dialogue. She was preparing for something much bigger. It was a warm Friday evening when everything boiled over. Amelia and I were sitting on the porch, sipping sweet tea and talking about our weekend plans. That's when a police cruiser pulled up in front of our home. I stood, confused, but calm. Amelia instinctively straightened her back, a reflex from years of service. The officer stepped out, looking almost apologetic. "Sir, ma'am," he said, "we received a call about a suspicious person living in this residence, possibly squatting." "Squatting?" Amelia repeated, stunned. "This is my house." I immediately knew who was behind it. Karen strutted out of her house seconds later, smiling smugly like she had personally summoned justice. "There she is," Karen said, pointing at Amelia. "She's not on the deed. She just showed up here. She's not authorized. I believe this is a case of illegal occupancy." The officer glanced at us, visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said to Amelia, "do you have identification?" Now here's where it all changed. Without missing a beat, Amelia pulled out her wallet and handed the officer her active duty military ID. The officer blinked. Then he looked at Karen. "She's an active duty officer," he said firmly. "There's no crime here." Karen's face turned white as snow. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know. She mumbled. The officer handed the ID back to Amelia and then turned toward Karen. "False reporting is a serious offense," he warned. "Next time, verify before calling 911. You could have been wasting emergency resources." Karen stood frozen. For once, she had no clipboard, no rulebook, and no power. Just a neighbor who had crossed the line and got caught red-handed. We thanked the officer, who shook Amelia's hand and said, "Thank you for your service, ma'am." Then he drove off. Karen stood there a moment longer, humiliated, before retreating, like a scolded child. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. The HOA board meeting was packed. Word had gotten around about the incident with Karen, and many neighbors had come to see what would unfold. Amelia and I sat calmly at the back until public comment began. Karen stood at the front, pretending nothing had happened. "Let's begin with landscaping compliance," she said, as if she hadn't just embarrassed herself and the HOA days earlier. When my name was called for public comment, I stood and stepped forward. "I'd like to address the issue of harassment and abuse of power," I began. A few heads turned. For weeks now, my wife, Captain Amelia Torres, has been targeted with false violations and even a 911 call based on nothing but prejudice. We moved into this neighborhood to be part of a community. Instead, we faced unnecessary hostility. Karen tried to interject, but one of the board members raised a hand. Let him finish. I held up a copy of the violation letters and even played the officer's body cam footage, which I obtained through a request. The room grew tense as Karen's intentions became undeniable. Then Amelia stood beside me. I've served this country for 12 years, she said. I've been in combat zones and humanitarian missions. I never expected to be disrespected in my own neighborhood. The room erupted in applause. One of the older residents, a retired veteran himself, stood and said, Karen, I think it's time you step down. Others nodded. The board took a vote right there. Karen was removed as HOA president by a 6-1. Majority. Later, we learned she had a pattern of targeting residents she didn't approve of, often people of color, veterans, or those who challenged her authority. The board issued a formal apology to Amelia and introduced a new policy. No HOA member could file anonymous reports without evidence. False reporting would result in penalties or HOA suspension. From that day forward, our home became truly peaceful. Neighbors we hadn't met came by with pies and flowers. One elderly couple said, We're so glad someone finally stood up to her prejudice hides in polite rules, but truth exposes it. Karen judged Amelia by her presence without knowing her honor, her sacrifice, or her strength. In doing so, she lost the power she clung to so tightly.